Hi there and welcome back to my channel. My name's Ed, and during lockdown I made quite a lot of YouTube videos, and unfortunately the day-to-day pressures of teaching art meant that I haven't been able to do much since. So if you're tuning in now for the first time, it's just turned New Year 2023. And what I decided over Christmas was I thought I'd really like to start uploading some videos again, and maybe just start with some clips from some of my actual face-to-face art classes. So what follows now is a clip from last term, and I was teaching portraits, and it just come to the end of the term and I was doing an exercise on colour mixing. So this was filmed at Ringshaw, which is one of my classes in Suffolk. If you are in Suffolk area and you're interested in learning to paint, then you can find the details on my website and you'll find the link for that below. Otherwise, you might find this interesting. So this is basically colour mixing with the Zorn palette, and I found it really useful last term, and so did a lot of my students. So hopefully you'll find something useful in this. So what I've been doing this week is an exercise that's inspired by the artist Colin Davidson. So I brought in some of his work over the last few weeks, but that's one of his. Okay, he's also quite well known for doing that big portrait of Ed Sheeran that was in the Christchurch mansion for a while. Remember that?
Yeah, yeah. Is that Ed Sheeran?
This is it's aged a bit. But yes, what he does is he paints these portraits, and he paints them really like they're big portraits. And I really like them because, to my mind, what they do is they are very accurate in terms of their drawing. They're very accurate in terms of their colour, the colour mixing, the colour accuracy. But they have this very sort of loose, expressionistic feel to it. So Colin Davidson, he does upload tutorial videos every now and again on Facebook. And I watched one a few years back. And it was about how he would go about mixing his colours if he was taking on a large portrait. And because he's painting thick, he was basically mixing up quite a quantity of paint. So it's a really useful exercise. So what I'm going to do is go through it, but I'm going to adapt it using the Zorn palette. Okay. Now it's interesting, he actually did it using a palette that was 3 primary colours. It was like magenta, phthalo blue or phthalocyanine, cyan, and a yellow, just a sort of bright yellow, okay, and a white. But all of those colours, apart from the white, were effectively transparent colours. That obviously was how he was using. So with the Zorn palette, it's a bit different because the yellow ochre isn't transparent, and nor is the cadmium red. Okay, so you get slightly different effects. And the principle of it is that what we do is we start off, we mix up what he describes as a foundation colour. And the foundation colour is when you look at basically it's their flesh tone, the sort of local colour of their flesh, so without thinking about the light or the shadow. And as you know, everyone has slightly different complexion. Some people lean more towards pink, some people a bit more orangey, some people olivey. So the first job is to mix this foundation colour, and then what he does is he makes modifications of that using the 3 primaries and, as it turns out, the secondaries. Okay? So I will go through it. Now, it's worth stating that when I've tried this with my other classes, actually, that if they see this, apologies to this, but some of them did find it a little bit difficult to follow this exercise. Okay, not all of them, just to stress. But it is, so try your best to sort of remember it, okay, because it's got a little bit of complexity to it. So the first thing is to mix up this foundation colour. So now you need a decent sized blob. That was the first thing, which again for a lot of people goes against the grain. Some people, they prefer to put out very small blobs, but we start quite big, and as I say, we're using a palette knife, and Colin Davidson liked these big, thick paintings. So today is an opportunity to experiment with that. Okay, and then to mix this foundation colour, we should start off with a little bit of our yellow, in this case yellow ochre, okay, and a touch of the cadmium red. And just a touch, because the cadmium red in this case is a very bright mixing colour. Okay. Now, before I mix that, I'm also going to put out my 3 blobs of paint here. So we'll put ivory black here, which, as you know, in the Zorn palette is the substitute blue. And then we'll put yellow ochre here. Okay. And then we'll put our cadmium red at the top here. Okay. Incidentally, I'll just say that this palette is very good for mixing. If you're going to get into the habit of pre-mixing paint, having a nice sized palette does make life a lot easier. Okay. And this palette has actually been, it's really nicely designed. So the idea is you can put your hand in like that, and it sort of holds close to your body like that. So you're taking all the weight on your forearm, and then you can do a lot of the work there. And also having it grey is nice because it means that all your, yeah, did I have it like that or like that? Well, let's go for that. Okay. Having it grey means that you can appreciate the tonal value more easily than mixing on white. Okay, so that's an advantage there. So, different palette knives. This is a sort of smallish, sort of trowel-like one, but you don't want anything too small, I think, with this. And a nice clean cloth, which I don't have, but we'll do this. Okay, so we can start by just mixing this central. This is our foundation tone. Now I'm just doing this with a sort of general sort of flesh tone in mind. Obviously you would look at your reference material, try and get this. Okay, so remember with the palette knife, what you're trying to do is to scoop up the paint and then squidge it down, okay? And it's the squidging it down that blends it all together. And if you were very thorough with this, you would do it in such a way as you wouldn't get any streaks. Okay, so that is basically white, yellow ochre, and cadmium red. And as you can see, it's made quite a nice flesh tone. It's probably a bit light, though. So we'll put in a little bit more yellow ochre. Because remember, this isn't our highlight colour, this is our actual flesh tone. So a bit more of this, a bit more of this. And I'm going to put a touch of ivory black in to neutralise it. So the white will neutralise it because the white is quite a greyish colour. But the ivory black will also bring it down a tone or two. And you'll see that I'm putting in very small little bits. One of the problems of colour mixing is to suddenly lurch too much in one direction, and then you need loads of white and yellow and stuff to balance it back out. So small bits. Okay, having mixed that up, let's have a look what that looks like. So that's looking a bit more like it, isn't it? Now I have to say this is the first time I've done it this week using the Zorn palette. I thought if I did it exactly like Colin Davidson, it might be on the verge of plagiarism. So seeing it with the Zorn palette is quite nice, I think. And that, as you can see, is quite a nice naturalistic looking flesh tone. Okay? So let's assume that's good enough for our foundation. So we'll make a nice blob of that. But for this exercise, you do need a fair quantity of that, as you'll see. So, and then I do end up with a little bit extra on the palette knife. It sort of scoops up in the middle. Okay, so the next bit of the exercise was to mix the secondary colours. Okay, so we take a little bit of the yellow ochre. Again, we need enough to sort of make this worthwhile, and a little bit of the cadmium red. The cadmium red is particularly strong in terms of tinting strength, so a bit more yellow ochre. Okay, so as far as the Zorn palette is concerned, this is my orange. Okay, and that's not a vast amount of paint there at all, so I could probably have done a bit more, but that's our orange.
Sorry, what did you put in there?
That's just yellow ochre and
Just
cadmium
the two?
red. Yeah.
Right, no, not the flesh.
No flesh tone yet, so okay, so we get that clean. Then we got the yellow ochre and the ivory black. So this is our, as close as we're going to get to a sort of greenish tinge, the Zorn palette. You see, what I like about the Zorn palette is you do get this nice sort of neutral, it's obviously not a bright green, as you would have got with a sort of brighter yellow and a stronger blue. Okay. So something like that. As you can see, it's almost a bit of a mossy sort of a green. Yeah. And then a bit of ivory black. Put this up here. And a bit of cadmium red. So this is our best stab at a purple with the Zorn palette because we're using our red and blue. Okay, so it's really nice just to do this. It's quite a sort of, can be quite a meditative exercise because you just get into colour mixing just for the enjoyment of seeing the paint. And when it's really nicely blended, it's basically like you created this new paint didn't have before. Okay, so far so good. So we now have 6 colours and our foundation tone. Okay, so then what he did in his exercise is he takes the foundation tone and we create a couple of steps. Because remember, what we're interested in is modifications of the foundation tone. So this is again, if we're doing a larger portrait, having these to hand from the beginning is going to make life a lot easier. So we've got that, we've got that, one there, there. Okay, so the idea is we've got 2 steps towards each sort of spoke of the colour wheel, okay? And then what I'm going to do is sort of merge those in. And again, just trying to be careful not to go, I don't want to go nuts, but we're looking for modifications. We're not looking for orange, we're looking for a flesh tone that's tinted with orange. So something like that, yeah? So that gives me that. Then I can take a little bit of this colour and then go into this one. And that now gives me my second step towards the flesh tone. So it should be different from the foundation, but a little step lighter. Yeah? That gives me that. And then go to that. So I think this is where I fast forward it on the YouTube video. So the challenge here is to get these distinct steps. Okay, like that. And we've got this greenish tinge. So. So this will be my bluish tinge. Okay, that is too much towards the ivory black there. So what I'll do is just grab a little bit extra of my foundation. Put that in. Okay, so that's bluish, a little purplish note, so touch of that up here. And whether this will read as a purplish note, I'm not sure. Hopefully it'll be a bit different from the black. I think that's a bit purplish, would you say? Yeah. So it's not as purple as if you were using a brighter palette, but that's as close as we'll get to purple with this palette. Then like that. And then we've got the red. Remember, the red is very strong tinting strength, so got one there.
So not putting any whites.
I am. I'm just about to. Yeah. So that gives me my. These are my. These are all these modifications of this foundation tone. See, and this already gets me off to a good start. So when we're looking at a portrait, take this as an example. You know, it's seeing all the. You tend to get these bluer colours around the jaw, around the cheeks. You've got this sort of pinker, redder tones. You'll find those around the nose. Okay, so you will see these colours, okay, and that's what will make your portrait more interesting than sticking with a flat flesh tone. Okay, so what he does next is you put a very thin strip of white in between these spokes. I say a thin strip, it depends how big your painting is. If you're going to do a great big painting, you'll need more. Okay, so these will give you your highlight tints. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just pick a direction and we'll go down. So we can go down, go into the orange like that, and then we'll just. I won't make this too exact. Gives me some nice light oranges. And that's got a little bit pink all the way down. So you should be trying to basically get these as quite sort of, again, variations. So we've got one there. This one is actually going to be modifications of the purple. So, now, let's say, if you're actually doing a portrait, you might find this a bit time-consuming as a way to start. But it's worth doing it, I would say, even if it's a modification of this in relation to your subject. It just means that you're going to have that paint to hand. You have to potentially mix it anyway. If you do it in this more deliberate way, it will improve the speed at which you can find colours using the palette knife. Okay, and it's like instead of just trying to mix, instead of just mixing the paint and using terps to affect the value, like the transparency, here you're just using the paint to get the correct value and the correct colour. So it is a good exercise to do. These were my modifications of the green. So these are greenish highlights, like so, and then modifications of the yellow. Okay, so by no means perfect, but this gives you an approximation. So now I've got a really nice palette and I can actually start dipping into this to paint my portrait. See? So that's what I'm going to suggest for you to have a go at today, is to get your Zorn palette out. Obviously if you're doing a portrait and you've got areas you might have areas, dark areas, parts of clothing. You can't use this exclusively. This is primarily for painting your face and your flesh tones. But this would really come into its all if you were painting bigger portraits, because then you need to have more quantity of paint. So actually using the palette knife becomes really useful. And then not only that, it's only obviously one step away from doing this to actually scooping up the paint with the palette knife and starting to paint your portrait. And you can certainly see in Colin Davidson's work, there are areas and passages where he's using the palette knife. And that will also sort of, it gives it a more confident feel when trying to search for each colour one at a time, one brush stroke at a time. Okay? Any questions about any of that? I say you don't have to even do it with the Zorn palette. You could do it with, a brighter yellow and a brighter blue if you wanted to. Okay? It's also quite a nice opportunity to understand the Zorn palette in various.
You're using it straight from the tube.
These blobs.
Yeah.
Yes, straight from the tube.
And then they go straight on the canvas.
Yes, that's right. I mean, that's another thing. Is you don't want to be putting a white here and a white. You put the blobs out with the sort of intention of mixing them in this pattern, because you can easily get in a bit of a mess with it if you've got separate blobs all over the place. Okay, excellent. Okay, we'll give that a go.